the cilantro attaching itself to the memories of flowers and staying on for dinner. He would track the rancor of a dead congoree through the house from his sojourns, through the bush to the fresh-cut grass of the savannah. These are the smells he will remember when he first makes love. They will lift him up, call him to passion the way the smell of a woman's skin will call him to her, interrupt the intricate 6/8 timing he imagines his heartbeat will call him to improvise prayer on his lips, and rain. It smells like rain.
Poetry is this. A girl in a wheat field, or it's absolutely not.
There's a specific thing we call to mind when we think nature poem. We think poems of softness and sentiment, poems that speak of nature as a place of quiet contemplation and repose. We might even think of nature poems as being of another age. The contemporary Black American poet, in my experience, certainly does not initially characterize herself as being a nature writer. More often than not, the Black relationship to land is too complex for her poems about it to be simply portraiture of that land. They must be poems in which we enter the land or wrestle with it, stand without or in opposition to it. Aracelis tells us, for instance, trust the mud is you and the soft silver afro of the dandelion. We are, after all, a people who've died on the land, been enslaved to it, been hung from its trees. The underbrush and the rivers contain untold beauty and terrible secrets. We, when we talk about it then, have to always know where we are in it or what it is we're looking at.
I can write about a city block and it's still nature as far as I'm concerned. I will be fine. When you live in New York, there's butterflies and there's pigeons and there's rats and there's, you know, you're surrounded by it. You're surrounded by it. You don't have to go someplace else to think about nature, to write about nature. It isn't a reserve of just places like this. You're surrounded in the world. If you're conscious of the fact that you're in the world and you bring that world into your poetry, that's nature. Right?
I tried to figure out what my long-term obsessions were, and then work backward. And what I cut out of all the books were poems that didn't participate in those evolutions.
Right. Looking out the window. Grace. Perhaps it's the deep, endless whir of the expressway in the background I need to keep. The shadows at this time in the afternoon, their fingers and blouses across the lawns and steps.
So, I mean, in terms of this program, we're here because there's a kind of complex question about the involvement or the inclusion in the canon of nature writing of African American writers, right? Of Black writers, period. Is there a point, at what point did you start thinking of yourself or not within the canon of nature writing?
It's kind of an umbrella that got held over my head later in life. I never thought of it that way.
I always had a sense of, you know, a relationship to sky. I loved picking up bricks in the back and seeing all the picture books and ants so it's been interesting to be. I live in New York now mostly, and in Amherst part of the time, and so I feel very taught by the sky, the dirt, concrete relationship between the two. I remember roller skating and knowing where the crack was, where you were going to kind of jump over and then see the green kind of come up through the cracks of concrete.
We are now the dominant element. Even if there are nature elements, it's often poking through a crack in the sidewalk, or, you know, it's a rat or a mouse in a big urban space. And I think this is such an interesting moment for writing and thinking about the natural world, that we have seen this journey, or become aware of this journey in a single lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, where before we were inconsequential in a beautiful way, and now we are profoundly consequential in a really troubling and as yet unresolved way.
To imagine that they had dirt, we had dirt, and and they had. And so I felt like somehow it's been a kind of stable connecting force. The ocean big time. Ocean big time too.
I rise from the table as if I were about to give it my evolutionary seat. One species admitting its shortcomings to the next big thing. How do we deal with it? This kinetic ambassador that has suspended forks in conversations brought us all eye to eye, finally.